So this is the segment called Drenda Reacts, and honestly, I don't even know what they're going to show me. Most of the time, Josh just picks them out and I react. So let's see what we've got here.
Within hours of January 6th, literally hours, you began to hear that day described as a deadly insurrection, and not just
Yes, we did, and we all heard that, insurrection.
Described by one news outlet or one politician, but in unison by all of them, almost like it was coordinated.
Because it was.
Deadly insurrection. That's how history may record January 6th. But the tape that we reviewed from within the building on that day proves it was neither an insurrection nor deadly. Here it is.
And I already said that because we were there on January 6th. It was grandma's prayer groups, people with American flags sitting in prayer circles, little children on the backs of their daddies. It was anything but an insurrectionist type crowd.
January 6th, when an estimated 2,000 rioters breached the Capitol building, causing the deaths of 5 police officers.
Certain dates echo
5 police officers?
Throughout history. December 7th, 1941. September 11th, 2001. And January 6th.
The mob beat off
I can't take it. Kamala Harris, I can't take it. Ugh.
officers with anything they had on them. Hockey stick, a flagpole, a fire extinguisher.
What?
Police officers died.
Donald Trump supporters who, of course, rioted and killed police officers.
By the evening of January 6th, the Democratic Party and its publicists in the national news media had settled on a description of what had happened.
They just look so somber with their masks coming through the Capitol. That way we can't identify any of them either. It's probably some camera crews, hard-paid actors.
That day. They distilled an enormous number of highly complex events that even now we don't fully understand, into a single emotionally laden political slogan, which they've repeated for years with remarkable discipline. January 6th, they said, was a deadly insurrection.
There was a deadly insurrection that the right wing is trying to cover up.
He incited a deadly insurrection.
Incited a deadly insurrection.
The violent, deadly insurrection on the Capitol 9 months ago, it was about white supremacy, in my view.
A deadly insurrection. Everything about that phrase is a lie. Very little about January 6th was organized or violent. Surveillance video from inside the Capitol shows mostly peaceful chaos.
Look at these people. Honestly, inside the Capitol, they're walking around, they're chewing gum, nobody's screaming, fighting, pushing anybody down. Not like anything we saw in the actual real riots that burned buildings.
But the slogan worked. The term deadly carries enormous emotional power, which is why they used it. To prove the insurrection was deadly, propagandists pointed to the death of an officer called Brian Sicknick. The mob killed Officer Brian Sicknick. That's what they said.
That's what
it was
they
their
said.
single most powerful indictment of the January 6th protesters and of Donald Trump and of Republican voters nationally. They repeated that claim for years. They are still repeating it. At first, they told the country that Officer Sicknick was murdered with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the fight.
That story came from the New York Times, which is effectively the assignment editor for most of the rest of American media.
Yes.
It was a lie, untrue in any way. But only after that lie had hardened into conventional wisdom did the newspaper bother to retract it.
Right, on the 15th page, probably in the teeniest print you could possibly see. That's the way retractions go. But nevertheless, the narrative they were looking for was already driven, just like the narratives we've seen during COVID and everything else.
The New York Times has quietly retracted its story about the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick.
The damage had been done. Brian Sicknick, himself a Trump voter, had been transformed without his consent into a political martyr of the left. His memory was shamelessly exploited by the incoming Biden administration. In February of 2021, Sicknick's body lay in state in the Capitol Rotunda, where a parade of unscrupulous politicians made use of it.
Unscrupulous is right. Wow, these people, they should get a Oscar.
Here's Joe Biden.
Breaking down the doors, trying to overturn an outcome of election, and killing several police officers in the meantime.
But Brian Sicknick should not be reduced to a prop for the political ambitions of the
Amen.
Democratic Party. He was a human being.
That's right.
The facts of his life matter, including
right.
how he died.
That's right.
To this day, media accounts describe Sicknick as someone who was, quote, slain on January 6th. The video we reviewed proves that is a lie. Here is surveillance footage of Sicknick walking in the Capitol after he was supposedly murdered by the mob outside.
Wow.
By all appearances, Sicknick is healthy and vigorous.
Yes.
He's wearing a helmet, so it's hard to imagine he was killed by a head injury.
Exactly.
Whatever happened to Brian Sicknick was very obviously not the result of violence he suffered at the entrance to the Capitol. This tape overturns the single most powerful and politically useful lie the Democrats have told us about January 6th. And it was indeed a lie.
And it took this long to get this footage?
January 6th committee knew perfectly well that Brian Sicknick was walking normally through the Capitol after he was supposedly murdered by Trump supporters.
Liz Cheney.
And they know that because they saw this tape. We can be sure because the footage contains an electronic bookmark that is still archived in the Capitol's computer system. That means that investigators working for the Democratic Party reviewed this tape. They saw it, but they refused to release the tape to the public.
Because it didn't fit their narrative.
Why? Because this tape would shatter the fraud they were perpetrating on the country.
Yes.
Because hiding the truth served their political interest.
Always.
They lied about the police officer they claimed to revere. If they were willing to do that, then their dishonesty knew no limits.
That's right.
Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly
Oh, brother. These folks, it's just frustrating. I was there January 6th, and I had a hard time convincing people that what we saw there was totally peaceful. I mean, it was completely peaceful. You didn't see any violence. I didn't see anybody in gear with any weapon and anything in their hand. The only weapon they might have, anybody could even say they had, was prayer and the Bible, possibly a few people with a flag, right? This was not a weaponized group of people. Trump supporters don't wear the kind of things that the people that were causing issues there. There were people causing issues. They weren't Trump supporters. As we later learned, there were people that were put in the crowd. There were all kinds of people that were put in there as set up there that were operators in there. There were people that were who knows what. Antifa maybe? I don't know. This is ridiculous. And it's ridiculous that it took this long for us to be able to see footage. If they were so convinced of January 6th, then why were they afraid to let us see what was going on? Why were they afraid to let us see the calmness of people entering the different chambers, that there was doors open, there were police officers and other people who were motioning them into, and whatever happened to Miss Boylan, who we saw get beat and trampled and mistreated to her death. And why has that not been investigated? And why do we have people that are still in prison for January 6th? Do they not have a right to a speedy trial? Do they not have a right to these videos? Why were they not allowed? Why was their prosecution defense, why was their defense not allowed to be able to see these videos and present them as evidence in court? We even had one who committed suicide while in prison. I can't imagine anything more egregious than to think that you have freedom of speech to go that day for a peaceful protest, end up in prison, being labeled and fingered as an insurrectionist, so much so that you lost faith in your justice system and took your life. This is serious, and we should not forget what really happened January 6th. Now, I was taken into Mike Pompeo's office where we prayed for him that day, and I thanked him later when I saw him. Thanks for the alibi, Mike, and I guess you had one too. But there were a lot of people who were just there to pray for our country, who felt like the real insurrection happened on November 3rd, and were there to stand up and say, we want our vote counted. And those people were labeled and turned in by a planned, organized plot, if you will, to become insurrectionists.